Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Kennedy, Managing Staff Instructor at LinkedIn Learning. Thank you so much for joining us today for Live with LinkedIn Learning. Now, today we're going to be talking about career advancement and promotions. We'll explore how you can model great leadership, even when you're not in a position of formal authority. We'll discuss when it's the right time to look for promotions and how to position yourself for advancement. We'll also touch on the best ways to ask for feedback, why you may want to work with a mentor, and how to be a trusted team player, and so much more. We're really excited about this conversation because, after all, LinkedIn's mission is all about setting people up for success and career advancement. And in today's changing job climate, it's more important than ever to be aware of the ways that you can practice great leadership and look for the next job. Specifically, this conversation is part of a current LinkedIn Learning campaign that takes a look at which of our courses that job seekers use the most. So specifically, we've identified learners who were hired or promoted in the past year, and we've looked at what courses they watched prior to getting that new job. Joining me today is LinkedIn Learning staff instructor Garrick Chow. He is a familiar face to so many as he's been creating courses for LinkedIn Learning and prior lynda.com for the past 21 years. He authors a diverse range of topics, including instructional design, productivity, web design, audio engineering, and video editing. He also regularly leads live classes and seminars at private companies, government agencies, and universities. Garrick, thank you so much for helping to host today's conversation.
Hey, Ashley, thanks so much. Absolutely thrilled to be here today. I'm really excited to talk to our panelists today because, as you mentioned, I think career advancement is at the top of many people's minds lately. I'm particularly interested in looking at the strategies they laid out in their most recent course that you mentioned called Leading with Formal Authority, where they discussed how to find opportunities to make yourself stand out and exhibit leadership skills, even when you aren't technically in that leadership position yet. And I think a lot of the strategies that they discuss in this course are especially important today, as almost all of us are a full year into the pandemic and quarantining at home, and we've all experienced how difficult it is to get a word in edgewise sometimes in a conference room with everybody, but it's even more so when we're on a Zoom call or just relegated to an email chain. So I'm very interested in hearing what our guests have to say about continuing to advance our careers in the current landscape.
Absolutely. And, I think that, there are so many things that people from all over the world can gain from this conversation. It looks like we have viewers from Egypt, Chile, Brazil, all over the world. So I really hope that this is a valuable conversation for our global audience.
That is one of the advantages of this sort of format. We can come together from all over the world. I know you're in Chicago, I'm in Pennsylvania, and our guests today are from the Atlanta area. And full disclosure, you are my manager, so you're probably going to see me applying a lot of the strategies that we're talking about today. So I hope you don't hold that against me.
I encourage it. It's important to point out that these are not secret tricks that we're talking about. These are really sound strategies that anyone can follow to develop those leadership skills in their current jobs or to position themselves for promotions and advancement.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of practical knowledge that can be applied in so many different ways that we can get from this course. But should we go ahead and bring out our guests?
Absolutely.
Well, today we have Lisa McLeod. She is a best-selling author, keynote speaker, and consultant. She created the concept and strategy of what she calls the noble purpose, which I'm going to let her explain what that's all about. She's also a contributor to the Harvard Business Review, and her newest book is Selling with Noble Purpose, How to Drive Revenue and Do Work That Makes You Proud. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks. It's such a pleasure to be with you all.
Great to see you. We also have with us today Elizabeth Latardo. She's a consultant, a researcher, and she is Lisa's co-author on Selling with a Noble Purpose. And as the VP of Client Services at McLeod & Moore, she leads initiatives in transforming sales for clients like Oracle, GE Adventures, and Fiserv. She also has a master's degree in organizational psychology, so I kind of want to hear a little bit about what that's all about. And of course, along with Lisa, she's created multiple courses on LinkedIn Learning, including their most recent one, Leading Without Formal Authority. So welcome to you both, Lisa and Elizabeth.
Thanks for having us.
Lisa and Elizabeth, we're really appreciative of your perspectives as we dive into this exciting topic. Before we do, though, I just want to make sure our viewers know that this is meant to be an interactive discussion. At any point, please type a question into the chat box, and our team will be passing along questions to this panel. We'll be taking as many of your live questions as we possibly can. For now, though, I'm excited to turn the conversation over to Garrick.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. Well, I thought we'd start by getting to know you a little bit. You two are obviously independent experts and thought leaders in your own right, but you're also mother and daughter. And I was wondering if we could start by hearing a little bit about how you came to work together and to write together and to develop courses on LinkedIn Learning together.
I had the business for a number of years, but I'll let Elizabeth tell why she joined.
Okay.
I think as it relates to leading without formal authority, Lisa and I both approach this topic in really different ways. And that's been a huge benefit to us as we partner together on LinkedIn Learning courses and consulting work. I come at this from a frontline point of view. I fought the battles of leading without formal authority. And Lisa advises executives and knows what they're looking for in employees who want to be promoted, who can take that next step in their career. So I think the combination of our 2 points of view have created a really interesting course, no matter where you are in your career journey.
Yeah, it's interesting that this particular course, Leading Without Formal Authority, was one of the ones that was directly correlated to promotion, that when people took it, often promotions followed. And one of the things that I often say about the course is, it's everything I wish I had known 25 years ago when I was trying to get promoted inside a company. And so the differing perspectives, as Elizabeth said, I coach executives and I hear what they say about people. And knowing that really informed this idea of how to build your career so that you're not, you're still your authentic self, but you're positioning yourself in the best possible way for others in the organization.
So a lot of this is coming from your own personal experience in the workforce and through your consulting, which is really interesting to me because I think a lot of people oftentimes feel that they don't have the place or the right to take on a leadership role if it isn't explicitly illustrated in the org chart for them. But clearly that's not the case. Can you talk a little bit about some ways people can take on these leadership roles without sort of taking on that negative aspect of like, who are you to be taking on this role?
Right. And it is interesting when you said the negative aspect of who are you to take this on, that voice starts here. Before we even open our mouths. And in many cases, it keeps us from opening our mouths. So one of the things that we know is that when you lead without formal authority, the formal authority often follows. But what we also know is going in like a bull in a china shop and saying, I should be in charge of everything is not the most effective way to position yourself in an organization. And so it's kind of interesting. One of the things that we found in our research of people who emerged as really strong leaders, and it may be that you're going to get a promotion, or it may simply be that you want the power to get more things done inside your organization. You want to be a go-to person. You want to have influence over others. One of the things that ironically we found was one of the key strengths was deep listening.
What you call mindful listening in the course, I believe, right? That was actually another interesting topic to me in the course. Where you point out that I think a lot of people feel that in order to sort of exude those leadership qualities, they have to jump right into the conversation and start talking and have a response to what everybody says at all times. But your idea of mindful listening kind of contradicts that or goes the other way. So I don't know if you could expand a little bit on why that is a better practice to form these leadership characteristics.
Mindful listening, or at least the way we approach it, is listening to truly understand, which is different than listening to respond. And there's a couple of reasons why this is such an important pillar of leading without formal authority, and why Lisa and I were both so adamant it come at the front of the course, because people do tend to think, oh, if I'm going to be a leader, I need to step in and take control of this conversation. But what we know is that the people who mindfully listen have a couple of distinct advantages. First, after you mindfully listening, your comments are going to be better. Your opinions are going to be more informed, and people are going to see that because you're drawing from the wealth of knowledge in the room. The other thing that mindfully listening does is positions you as someone who's really collaborative inside of the organization versus someone who steamrolls. So reputationally, you have a benefit there. From a pure performance standpoint, you're going to be able to create more informed comments and give better feedback when you listen first. So for all of those reasons, we think, especially because it's counterintuitive, mindfully listening is an absolutely crucial skill to move up.
Yeah, and I want to make the point here, the sequencing is what's really key. When you think about leading without formal authority, I look back at times when I was young and I was trying to establish myself as a leader. And I did feel like I need to step in, I need to step up and say something. And I often did it too early. So one of the things that we talk about in leading without formal authority is this sequencing, and how if you want to step in to some type of leadership role, when you're listening at a meeting and then you speak, it has more gravitas because you're seen as someone who truly assessed the situation versus just, I'm trying to show you I'm cool. And so the sequencing here is really important. And it also, if you're reluctant to speak, knowing that mindful listening is a power play will give you more confidence, because then you don't feel like I should jump in, I should jump in. Then you can sit there and say, I'm going to listen for the first 10 minutes before I talk. And then you're building your confidence and your language and your point of view in those 10 minutes. And you're not just waiting to talk. You're really, as we said, mindfully listening.
Yeah, the waiting to talk thing, I'm sure we've all seen that in the conference room before, where you're speaking to somebody and telling them your position. You can see that look in their face or their eyes where you can tell they're not really hearing you, but they're just trying to come up with their particular response, which is why I think this whole idea of mindful listening is so interesting, because not only are you, when it is your time to speak, you have the advantage of speaking last. So you have that image of having absorbed all of the information that's coming at you, but it also shows that you have been listening, as you said, and it does give you that image of collaboration that I think is missing in a lot of these conversations.
And it is a key leadership skill. And one of the things that's happened now when we go to Zoom, I do want to give the people who are waiting to talk a little bit of love here, because a lot of times it's not just because they're, trying to establish dominance. It's often because you said something that they want to add to. And as a raging extrovert who gets really excited, who comes from a family of overtalkers, it's not the worst thing in the world. It means people are excited. But this power move of listening and deep listening, not acting like it, and doing that on a virtual, that's where you can get such great leadership gravitas. Because when you're leaning in and listening on a Zoom, you can 100% of your attention on that person. And then when you do speak, they felt it. And psychologically, they are going to respond to you very differently. And this can be used with people above you, people below you, or your peers. For a lot of people, leading without formal authority is about having more organizational influence.
I thought you say you've been saying it's a power move, and it is, but it's also a genuine move. It's actually It's an improvement to yourself. It's not just a trick where you I'm going to pretend to listen, but you actually are listening, and that helps you genuinely understand why someone is speaking and what they're saying at the same time.
And when I say power move, I'm really glad you picked up on the nuance of that. That's what I mean. You are increasing your true, authentic power, not I'm going to play some game and psych you out here. It's not that at all. And that's what leading without formal authority is about, because it starts within, and your ability to do that builds up your own level of strength in yourself. And it's true and authentic.
And it's something that I imagine will continue to improve as you continue to practice, like most things.
Very much so.
Ashley, did you have a question from the comments?
Yeah, I really appreciate how you have sort of segued from the traditional meeting culture, where you can practice mindful listening in a meeting, and then in the Zoom culture where it's a little bit different. I do have some questions from the stream that address this a little bit, and we have let's see. Ankit asks, how can we make ourselves stand out from others that have a very similar role as us? So if we are, kind of in this collaborative environment and we have a team, and the mindful listening that you just brought up, but other strategies in order to, show that leadership when there's a lot of people kind of at the same level in the hierarchy.
That's a great question. We see that play out a lot in common roles like a BDR or a project manager, things that tend to be pretty uniform in terms of scope. So the way you stand out is in the how. how you're doing it, and also the relationships you're building along the way. Before we hopped on this stream, all of us were kind of talking about leading without formal authority. And I made the comment that leading without formal authority is not something I was taught in school, but it is instrumental in a successful career. Your ability to set direction, to get buy-in, to adapt to change, to win the hearts and minds of people around you, that's what gets promoted. So you have to do all the technical things in your role. If you're a BDR, you have to deliver a certain amount of leads. If you're a project manager, you have to have your deliverables done on time. And the odds are the people who are also high achievers in that role are doing that. So I'd say if you want to stand out, you have to take it one level up and focus on that relationship building and the rapport you're developing within your organization.
Very good. And then Hassan asks, can everyone be a leader in no matter what role they are? So it's like, is everything that you're saying possible in any role at all? Or are there, differentiations in how we should approach these techniques that you're talking about?
It is not role specific. So everyone can be a leader. And if you think about this, there are people in the organization. You could have a line of customer service people who all do technically the same job, but there are certain people that are the go-to people that have more influence. And to Elizabeth's point earlier, it's that level that goes beyond doing your core function. It's the way you interact with others. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do more work. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes about taking on additional things. But leading without formal authority is about the essence of who you are and approaching your interactions with others very intentionally. So that when you are in a spot where people want to know, what should we do here? You're a natural person to ask. When you're in a spot where you want to get something done, you have the goodwill of your peers and colleagues. They listen to you, and it makes your job a lot more effective. And the real skill of it is found in the nuance. And that's what we're talking about. And it used to be the way that you became an informal leader, on the playground, it was a bully, but we know that doesn't work very well. It's probably not who you want to be anyway, but this is that nuanced approach to it. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in the course and give some examples in leading without formal authority is about the language that you use, because that's what people are taking their clues from, your intent and your language.
It's interesting. That question actually puts me in mind of a conversation I had recently where there seems to be, especially in the US, I think, there's this almost a stigma, I would say, if you're just simply content in your job, you're not necessarily looking for a promotion, but you're happy in your job. But I think what you lay out in this course can be applied whether you're looking for an actual literal promotion or if you're just looking to be happier or more successful in your current role.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I want to say is, happy in your current role, you may be happy in that for 30 years, or you may just be happy for now. People go through different life stages, and we address that. And one of the things that we wanted to do was give people the tools to make their current job more fun and happier, so that you're not begging your colleagues to turn in their deliverables, so that you're that person that people look forward to having meetings with, that they want to go to with new ideas. When you become that person, your current job is a lot better.
Making it better for yourself makes it better for everybody else.
Yeah, it's kind of the reverse. In some ways, making it better for them makes it better for you. That's kind of a meta moment there.
Oh.
Well, maybe we could dive a little bit deeper into that. And could you talk about some of these key leadership practices you can sort of employ with your peers to make things better for them and in return make things better for yourself?
To me, one of the most important pillars of leading without formal authority is setting expectations. And Garrick, this gets back to your point around you don't want to be the boss and bring the hammer down if you don't have the hierarchical authority to do so. But one of the things we talk about in leading without formal authority is creating shared group expectations. And that's really different because that shared group expectation is, one, inclusive, and two, you have to hold yourself accountable for that too. So if you're creating a shared group expectation that we send send out agendas before a meeting because it makes us all better. You have the ability to do that as an informal leader in a really invitational way and saying, I love how we all work together in meetings. I find that we get the most done when we have shared agendas. How do people feel about that? So I think not shying away from making these improvements and prompting your group to move forward, even if you don't have the hierarchical authority to necessarily bring down the hammer.
So it's about, it seems like it's a lot about leading with your behaviors rather than with formal declarations.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll give you a quick example. We all have people in our life that we know we need to be on time for. And we have other people in our life that we know it's okay to be late for because they've trained us through their behaviors. This takes a number of behaviors. And when you exhibit them over time, taken together, you emerge as a person who has the support of their peers, runs great meetings, is looked at as an influential figure, is a go-to person. In other words, an informal leader.
That's so true. I mean, I had a peer at one point who was so consistently like 10 minutes late for meetings that we just kind of like informally built that into our meetings. Like, well, he won't be here for another 10 minutes, so we should take care of these other things first. And he sort of just built that expectation into it. And it wasn't until we were close enough that I could sort of sarcastically say, hey, you should just quick do a keystroke program so you don't have to like type out, I'm going to be 10 minutes late, just press one button and you'll be able to send that each time.
Yeah, default message response, I'm on the way. It's more than just him that has this issue.
Yes.
But we also have people that we know that we respect, not the ogres, but we have people that we respect that we know to be on time and prepared for because they've taught us that with their behavior. And that's what we're talking about in leading without formal authority. And that's why the people who've taken this course wind up getting promoted because people start to think of them when they're exhibiting these behaviors. Wow, in that meeting, boy, she really, hit the nail on the head when she summarized everything. When he gave that presentation, he really connected the dots to our larger strategic goals. And so when you start to see these behaviors all together, people look and go, oh, well, that person needs to be in charge of something. There we go.
I think the crux of this really is if you act like a leader, the title will catch up. And if the title is not something you want to change, your ability to influence others, people's willingness to help you, all of that stuff will catch up. You just have to lead by example.
Could I explore that in terms of extroversion versus introversion? Because a lot of what you're talking about really seems like this admirable, go get 'em kind of presence. But I have a few questions from the stream that really hit on this in terms of what do I do if I'm an introvert? Sonia is asking if you have any advice for introverts to not only show this leadership, but then possibly even go further in career advancement. I would love to hear your responses here.
Well, you have one of each on the call, one extrovert and one introvert. So I will let the introvert take the question.
Great.
Yeah, I guess I'm the resident introvert on the call. But contrary to how extroverted I'm appearing now, in 50 minutes, I will be curled up with a blanket and a book. But really, the interesting thing about leading without formal authority is I think we bump up against this perception that leadership has to be the loudest voice in the room, it to be the most extroverted, the most inspiring, and give these big speeches. But in reality, leadership is the sum of a lot of small interactions. And those interactions can be one-on-one interactions. So if you want to develop more informal authority or ultimately work your way to formal authority, I would encourage you, if you are introverted, to leverage the one-on-ones, to when you're giving someone feedback, really lean into that and make it a great conversation. When someone asks you for advice, when you're working with someone on a project, those one-on-one moments are just as important, if not more important, than the big meeting where you get to be, Mr. and Mr. Q-tip. So don't think that it has to be this big group presentation to lead without formal authority. You can do it on a one-on-one basis in a lot of small meetings.
And I will also say, as the raging extrovert, some of you extroverts out there, takes us a while to learn, but your ability to be quiet sometimes is going to make you a better leader. And so the thing that I want to communicate to the introverts is the data tells us that introverts actually make great leaders, and there's a lot more awareness of that. So don't for a minute think you need to turn yourself into some big, super high energy extrovert to be an exceptional leader. Draw from the strengths that you have which are your ability to make one-on-one connections, your introspection, your deep listening. When you draw on that, it's the real you. And all the data tells us that those people make exceptional leaders.
I love that you, the extrovert is celebrating the qualities of leadership and introvert. As an introvert myself, I, really admire that, and it makes me feel good to, continue those strategies that you guys were talking about. However small, in those one-on-ones, in those small group meetings, and beyond. I have some more questions in this regard in terms of confidence. Katerina asks, how do you gain confidence in leading? She says she's a very hard worker and always goes the extra mile, but is struggling a little bit in that confidence factor. And so, can you bring that into the discussion in terms of making sure that you have the confidence in order to practice some of these strategies that you've been talking about?
Yeah, in many ways, it's kind of a flywheel. And since Katerina, without knowing her, I'm going to assume she's a woman, women often feel like there's been a lot of studies on this, like we have to wait and be 100% confident before we step in. And the data tells us that that is not true at all. That actually, if you are, 40, 50, 60% confident enough, that's enough. And this becomes kind of a flywheel. And so what I would say is if you're looking at these leaders that are up here and you're thinking, wow, I could never do that, start with something you can do. And that will build your confidence to do the next thing. It's like when Weight Watchers and people need to lose 50 pounds, they don't go, oh my God, 50 pounds. They go, okay, I can do this week and I can lose 1. And then it becomes this thing that has its own energy. So some things you can do specifically are you can offer to head up a project, which puts you in a natural position because you're going to give the report. And when you're giving the report, really think about how you're positioning yourself strategically. You can offer to mentor someone because they're going to be automatically looking to you for leadership. So the way you build your confidence is by doing and finding some small ways to do and then building up those. Elizabeth, do you want to add anything to this? Because I know we get a lot of emails on this.
Sure. Something that's worked for me personally in terms of building confidence is dealing with the worrying. A lot of times a lack of confidence stems from worrying that something won't go well, worrying that you aren't good enough, worrying that people won't like your ideas, worry. And our brains are naturally pointed to avoid risk and to be hyper aware of things that could go wrong. So if you're struggling with confidence, a helpful little brain hack to do here is to ask yourself, what if it goes awesome and they love it? What if people love my ideas? What if this ends up working out great? And point your brain towards the potential reward instead of the potential failure. And that will help you muster some of the confidence because you'll see the gain instead of just the potential consequence.
What if it goes awesome? That is, I'm going to definitely use that going forward. That's a great mantra. One more question from the stream before I hand this back over to Garrick. And this is a question from Liliana asking how to approach these sort of tactics if your organization is a very small organization where there's seemingly no opportunity to move up. I'm sure you see this all the time, but I'm interested to hear kind of what you have to say about somebody that feels kind of like they're at the ceiling.
So the question is, what do you actually want? Is the first question. And maybe you want to move up. Maybe you just want more influence in your job. I think the way to approach it is think about, in an ideal world, what kind of leader would I be? And then start acting that way. Because a lot of people think, well, I can't be a leader until I get the promotion. So first think about, what do I really want? Do I want to move up here or elsewhere? And then start looking at some of the strategies that we outline the course around. There's some language techniques and things like that, and start using those. And what will happen is you will start to find yourself in a more informal leadership position. And then you can decide. You don't have to see this clear, straight line. Then you can decide, are there opportunities to move up here? There may be things that you didn't know about in terms of expansion. Or if you decide, wow, I really like being a leader, I want more, and there are not opportunities there, then you will be more seasoned and had the chance to practice it when you go looking elsewhere.
So I'd like to go back and touch a little bit on the idea. A lot of these concepts that we're talking about, I think, are fantastic ways to sort of just do little things that add up to a big thing. One of the challenges I think we're all facing right now, obviously, is doing this in a virtual environment.
Oh, yeah.
And I was wondering if either of you had any suggestions for how we can put a lot of these into practice while not being able to be in the same room with people.
Absolutely. What we're seeing in a virtual environment is that the both positive leadership behaviors and the negative leadership behaviors are magnified. Take mindful listening, for example. In an in-person meeting, when you're mindfully listening, you can give some subtle cues. It's easier to pick up on body language. You can kind of tell when someone's wrapping up their thought. In a virtual meeting, that's a lot harder. There's a small delay between someone's audio when they're actually speaking it and when you're hearing it. It's harder to pick up on body language. It's more difficult to detect tone of voice. So I think the level of intentionality that we have to apply to mindful listening, to setting expectations, to being on time with our deliverables in a virtual environment is so much greater than an in-person environment. And it's on all of us as informal leaders or formal leaders who just want to develop more influence to be really, really intentional about that.
Well, the other thing you have to realize about a virtual environment, while some aspects are more challenging, it's also very egalitarian. We don't all walk in and take our places at the table with the top dog sitting at the head of the table. We're all the same square in the Brady Bunch thing. And so there are oftentimes opportunities to lead. And I'll give you one example of something we saw the other day. We were doing a company kickoff for a group, and there were 600 people on a call, and we were speaking, and we asked questions and asked them to post their responses in the chat. And some people wrote some really insightful things in the chat because we were asking them, what's your experience when you talk to customers about this? Somebody wrote something insightful. We turned and said, Garrick, you put something in there. Do you mind sharing that with us? So there are a lot of opportunities, and it's not, hey, look at me, but it's when you're there and you're doing that deep listening and you can put some conclusion or insight or a short pithy answer to a question. That is actually leading without formal authority and more likely to get the spotlight on you for more. Even if the leaders just call it out and notice it, that's leading without formal authority.
And two, I think in a virtual environment, we lose a lot of the coincidental connections we have with each other. You're not running into people in hallways. You're not taking elevator rides, saying good morning to everyone. So it's easy to feel isolated. And if you're working on leading without formal authority, I would encourage you to step into that. Find someone to mentor, create a book club at your work. All of these things like that can contribute, even if they're not specifically tied to your job, to the level of influence and connectedness you have to the organization. It's also going to make work a lot more fun for you because no one wants to sit through tactical Zoom meetings for 9 hours a day.
That's what I was going to say. You don't have to take on the big thing. Pick something that's going to be fun for you because then you'll shine.
That's really interesting. I'm a big believer in so much collaboration and work can happen in between the meetings, in the water cooler or in the hallways. And that's probably what I've been missing the most during a lot of this is all of our meetings start at a specific time and they end at a specific time. And it's not like you can hang out afterwards in most cases. The best I've been able to come up with is to maybe show up, sign into the meeting a couple minutes early and just be able to chat with whoever's there, which is also good for us introverts to have those one-on-one conversations spontaneously, I think. But are there any other aspects of physical meetings and collaboration that you think that we have some trouble doing in a virtual environment, and are there some substitutes that we can work in there?
Well, there is one old-fashioned substitute. The phone. And the reason I bring that up is we often make jokes about this. There was this very famous talk show host who hosts a late night show called Delilah on the radio. And she played these love songs with Delilah, and she was on for decades. And people would call her live on the radio and tell her things that just blew your mind, like personal stuff. And the reason I bring that up is there is something emotionally intimate about the phone. And I'm not suggesting you call up a radio talk show host or that you call up your boss and confess a bunch of stuff. But if you're wanting to forge a deeper connection with someone, especially again, if you're an introvert, try the phone. Say, rather than hop on a Zoom call, I'm going to go for a walk and let's have a phone call. You can take notes on your phone. You can be in a different space. That is some degree of jumpstarting collaboration. Get in a different space, be walking, be on the phone, and more ideas will come to you.
That's a really interesting point. Like I find that if I'm sitting in my chair on the phone, I'm just kind of fidgeting, things like that. But if I get up and walk around or even go outside, it does seem to clear your mind a lot more, so you can focus more on the conversation and not worry about so much what you're going to say next, and practice a little bit of that mindful listening while you're on that call.
It's easier to mindfully listen on the phone than it is a Zoom because you're not seeing yourself.
Yeah. That actually is a tip that I've heard some people say is actually, I know in Zoom in particular, you can turn off your own view. So once you get yourself settled, you can turn off your own camera so you can focus more on the people you're speaking to, rather than always checking to see if you're framed right or if your makeup looks good or whatever.
I think on that note too, the push to Zoom meetings is ever present, and our natural inclination in a virtual environment is to schedule a meeting, either a 30-minute meeting or a 1-hour meeting. But for effective collaboration, we have to be more creative than that. So I'd encourage everyone to look at virtual tools like mind mapping tools that can enable brainstorming, schedule some shorter meetings, use breakout rooms in larger meetings, and really be creative with how you're using these virtual tools if you are in a virtual environment to foster that collaboration. Because a Zoom meeting of 30,000 or of 30 people, 1,000 people, no matter how many, once you get beyond a few, it's just not going to be creative.
Yeah, and if you're really trying to establish yourself as a leader, leadership is all about engagement. You know, anybody can just tell people what to do, but leadership is really about the way you engage people. And so one way you can take the lead, as Elizabeth mentioned, is if you've got a meeting coming up with your team, find a new tool and you can be the one. One of the things we talk about in Leading Without Formal Authority is be the one that introduces a group to new things. And then you start to become known as an innovator. If that's the kind of ethos that you have for yourself that you want to share, be the one to do that with the team. It might not always work, but say, hey, I want to try something new. We want to collaborate more. I really miss those before the meeting, after the meetings, those coffees. I miss that. So I want to try and find a way to do it. That is leading without formal authority.
So finding new tools and finding the right tool, obviously, is a lot of help.
To be the leader, practice the tool in advance.
Right. And it seems like a really great way to sort of break out of the monotony of just having a bunch of talking heads in a box. Occasionally I'll be in a meeting where somebody will bring in a new tool where we can all take a poll together or play a trivia together that's related to, the job at hand. And it just seems like a new way to spark conversation around a topic that we might be all tired of talking about, but to give us a different perspective on that topic. Yeah,
and if you're an introvert, then that's a great way to lead, because that says, I want to put this forth. I want to get a lot of people talking. It doesn't mean I've got a new way.
I'd like to, you've both mentioned this idea of mentorship a couple times now. I wonder if we could expand a little bit on that. Like, how do you sort of make yourself known to be available to be a mentor in a situation like this?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing you can do, I had a mentor of mine who used to run a major television network, and I told a story about her in Leading Without Formal Authority that she didn't start out as my mentor. I would have loved to have gone to her and said, would you please be my mentor? But she's got 1 million people that she leads, and she's not going to just take that on. But one of the things she told me, she ended up being a mentor after a couple of years, and it was because I went to her with a series of very discreet, clear questions. But something she said to me stuck with me now that I'm older and I mentor people. She said, you don't choose your mentors, they choose you. So if you're looking to develop your own formal, informal authority, you can find someone smart and say, I see a lot in you. I'd like to help you. Would you be interested? So you don't have to wait for somebody to raise their hand and say, please mentor me. You can actually choose a mentee. And if you have got some skills in some area, if you're at a certain position, people will be really happy to be chosen by you. Yeah, I mean,
especially virtually.
Yeah, you don't have to put a crown on them and say, exalted one, I choose you. But just to say, I really think that as you grow in this area, I might be of help to you. I'd be happy to. Would you like that? And you'll see it right away. They'll go, oh my God, that would be so great. And they'll go, oh, sure, whatever. And then you gotta know and you can move on. But being mentored and being a mentor are both very effective ways to grow your informal authority.
Can you talk about it from the flip side in terms of the benefits of getting a mentor and being mentored as you practice some of these leadership skills?
So one of the things that is really important when you have someone mentoring you, and I'll go back to this woman who ended up mentoring me who ran a major network. And keep in mind, at the time, I was like 40 and she was in her 50s. So it wasn't like she was, taking some, college student under her wing. If you want someone to mentor you effectively, what you want to do is start asking them for advice on very discrete and specific things. So I asked her for advice. I said, I'm looking and working on this one thing. I could really use your perspective. She gave it to me and said, I think you should do this. I said, thank you so much. And I was done. And then emailed her about a month later and said, this was extremely helpful. Here's what I did and here's what happened. Would it be okay if I come to you from time to time with questions? And so it built gradually over time. And I wasn't thinking, oh my God, I got to get her to mentor me. What I was thinking was, this is a really smart person. If I could just ask her a couple questions, it would be helpful. So the onus was on me to make it easy for her. And so one of the things now that I look for when I mentor people is I want someone who's not just going to come blurt a bunch of stuff to me, but someone who's going to ask me specific questions. And this part's really important. Be coachable and take some action.
Could you elaborate a little bit on this idea? I think for a lot of people who have never had this mentoring and mentee experience, I try to explain they're not exactly a teacher. They're not exactly going to handhold you and walk you through everything. What is that experience like for the mentor and the mentee? They're not like when you come to your mentor with a question, you're not saying, do this for me. You're asking for their perspective. You're asking for their advice. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
I think you bring up a really important point here, and it gets to one of the mistakes that people make on both sides of the mentoring equation, being a mentor or being a mentee. And it's this, assuming that there is a tremendous level of technical expertise required. Your mentor is not someone you go to and say, how can I figure out this one specific tiny thing in my job? Your mentor is someone who takes a broader view, who can help you think strategically over the course of your career. So when you're looking for a mentor or you're looking for someone to mentor, don't get too caught up in the technical aspects of the job. This is larger looking than that.
I think, Lisa, would you say it goes back to your overarching question of what do you want? Like before you go to your mentor, you kind of have to know what you're looking for in your career, whether it's, again, to be happy in your current position for a while, or if you're going for actually a formal promotion.
Mm-hmm. And have something in your mind. If I'm mentoring a high school student, part of what I might be doing is helping them figure out what they want. But if someone in their 30s comes to me, and I'll tell you a way that is not leading without formal authority, is someone says, oh, you're an author? I'm thinking of writing a book. I'd love to pick your brain. That's not particularly helpful. But someone that emails me and says, you've authored several books, and right now I'm looking at doing a book on this. I've done my homework. Do you think that would be well received by the market? I mean, that's an example of a question that someone could ask me that would draw me in versus, oh, tell me everything you know because I'm too lazy to do my own homework. And so the idea of a mentor, in a lot of companies, they have formal mentorship programs, and those are great. And if you have one, go for it. Go for either side of that. But the idea of mentorship extends well beyond that. And when we talk about, again, leading without formal authority, it's having a network of people that you can go to for questions that you may have, things that are important to you, ideas on how you can move forward. And it may be a big network. And it's also about being a go-to person for other people, being known as a wise person who offers good counsel.
And starting to be seen as that leader in the organization.
Yeah, if all of a sudden we find out, oh, well, all the coders want to know, how to do X, Y, Z, they always go to Bill. That reputation is going to start to spread.
Right. Ashley, do you have anything from the comments?
I do. I have several specific questions about going for that promotion, but I guess to set those questions up, I'd like to just formally ask, you've talked about so many of the leadership skills that, you can build in order to basically set yourself up for success in order to be a good candidate for a promotion. But what about actually going for it? You've identified a job that you want that does happen to be an advancement in your career. Just talk about some of your advice in terms of making sure that goes well. And then I have a few follow-up questions after that.
That's an interesting question. And I think there's some interesting language in the question when you've identified what you want to go for. A lot of people make the mistake of waiting for the perfect job to be posted, even inside your own company, if you don't want to depart. But what I would suggest to everyone listening is you have the ability to shape that. There are tons of jobs that don't result in formal job postings. They're shaped from people internally. So if you are seeing a need for something, if you see a real opportunity to make an impact on your organization, speak up about that. And when you're speaking up, put your hat in the ring. So I would say that as we enter the topic of specific promotions, know that even if there is not a job posting exactly what you're looking for, the opportunity for promotion may still be there.
Well, and the other thing is a lot of times people go into an interview. So if you've either developed it yourself and saying, I think we need to do this, or if there is a posting, a lot of times people will go into an interview thinking that they need to prove they have the skills they need to do the job. And at lower level jobs, a lot of times that is important. Can you code? Do you understand Excel? Can you wait tables? Whatever the case may be. But when you go into these jobs that start to be in different levels of leadership, what the interview is about, the thing that's kind of the unspoken when you're going for something like this is do you understand the strategic direction that we're going in? And can you help take us there? And so when you go in saying, well, I've got this skill, I've got this skill, I've got this skill, you're not exhibiting your leadership. One of the things that we recommend that people do is if you are going for any type of leadership position in a company, you need to understand the strategic direction of that company, what their purpose is, what role this department will play. So even if the interviewer or series of interviews as you go for these is not asking about this, you're talking about it. So you're saying, well, I know our strategic direction is to go here. This department that I'm trying to lead, that I'd like to lead, plays this critical role, and I would really be excited about helping us go from here to here. And the person that's considering you, oh, yeah, that's it. Yes, that thing. That's what we're looking for.
I love that advice from both of you. And I think, as in a perfect world, if you're the best candidate, you'll get the job, right? But I have several questions that all stem from different types of discrimination. And I want to maybe just ask a couple of them, and you can sort of take this where you will. First of all, age discrimination. Renee asks, how does age factor into getting a promotion? I know there are laws against this discrimination, but I still know it exists. Pranali asks, I was wondering how to cross the age barrier to progress into leadership roles. Actually, I'll stop there because I have gender discrimination questions as well, but they are different issues. So
Right.
Yeah. Please take it away on talking about age and going for this promotion or at least career advancement.
So as the resident old person here on this call, I'll take this. And I will tell you, I'm not an EEOC lawyer, and I'm not going to talk about policy. What I'm going to talk about is what you can do within the scope of your control. So if you are older, I am in my 50s. And if you are older and you are trying to move up in some way or get a new position, one of the things that you've got to take a good hard look at yourself on is, am I current? Because sometimes age discrimination is real, but sometimes it's also unconscious. And people are thinking, is this person going to fit in? Are they with it? All these unconscious things are going on in their mind. So if you are an older person approaching things, your experience should be your advantage, but you want to make sure that you're current. Do I understand what this company does, where they're going, the technologies they use, and all those things? And you don't have to be a coder or anything like that. But if you're talking to people and you don't know what's on the company Instagram feed, and you don't even know what Instagram is, unless you're like a genius rocket scientist, that's going to be a tell. That's going to be a tell. And so that's the thing that is 100% within your control, is instead of thinking about your age, thinking about, am I current? Because we can all think of examples I am one of Marshall Goldsmith's 150 coaches. Marshall he'll tell you, he's old. Sally Helgeson is on there. She's older. And they're so current because they read what's current. They talk about what's current. They're not longing for some pastime. They have friends that are in their teens and 20s. And so you want to keep yourself current. And that's 100% within your control. So I'd be curious what all the young people think about that.
I think being current is important no matter what your age. And I would add to that, try to focus on the things in the interview that don't have to do with your age or your background. Bring up the company's values, their mission, their purpose, the future they see for themselves, and build that rapport on those larger looking issues, and your own background and even your own personality or characteristics will become even less important. And I see Dennis in the chat saying most hires are not fair and open. Seems like networking is more important than merit. How do I overcome this and get a job based purely on merit? And I will say a hard truth of, it's pretty impossible to get a job based purely on merit alone. You have to demonstrate these communication skills. You have to be able to work with other people to build the sphere of influence. And I think when it comes to interviewing, especially if you're facing an uphill battle of discrimination, which is never okay in any capacity, knowing that the more you push for those larger things, the more you bond with people on the purpose of an organization, the values that they share as a team, the less likely you will be to be held back by some of those other things.
Yeah, because here's one thing. As someone who, I started in sales, 30 years ago. And I always felt left out of the networking because the guys would go play golf or they'd do this. Well, guess what? People aren't doing that anymore. So that's one small advantage of the times that we're in now is the social events that people who weren't affluent or people who weren't the right sex or the right color often got left out of. Those aren't really happening anymore. But to Elizabeth's point, you're never going to get a job solely based on merit. Again, unless the job is being the fastest, coder or chemist. Even then, people are unconsciously looking at you saying, does this person understand where we're going? What can this person add to the organization? And when you give voice to things that are sort of sitting underneath that job interview, people lean into you. And if you're older, you ought to be able to do that better than someone younger.
And a lot of the advice that you're giving really kind of works for a lot of different types of perceived or actual discrimination, which I love, and it really does, help build those leadership skills in so many regards to set yourself up for advancement. That said, I was wondering, well, we're going to wrap things up in a moment, but just one more point about gender discrimination and a gender bias in leadership roles, and sort of there being some issues with the gender makeup at the top of the company, and that you may not have as much of a chance as a woman compared to a man for advancement in certain companies. So again, a lot of the things that you mentioned just now apply very well to this issue as well. But I want to just sort of dive into this if we can.
Yeah, I'll say one thing about it, and then I'll let Elizabeth take the bulk of the answer. As someone that faced huge gender discrimination, I'm not saying it's not real anymore, but one question you have to ask yourself is, am I telling a story that was based on 20 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago? Because the landscape has changed. It's still real, but the first thing to combat it that's with 100% within your control is get those old stories out of your head, because they're having a chilling effect on you. I know it did me, and it's something that I still struggle with. When I enter a room of men, I still think, oh, they probably don't want me to be here. And that's an old story. That's not true anymore. Elizabeth?
I agree with that. And I think we all face that and carry particularly impactful experiences with us and maybe apply them to situations that they don't necessarily fit with. What I will say on the point of gender discrimination is, if you are facing an uphill battle, especially in an interview or in an entry-level role, and you're looking to move up, look at who is at the top. If you do not see people like you, be really careful about which battles you choose to fight. because you don't want to waste your talents and your impact and your personality on somewhere that's not going to appreciate. Of course, it's hard to get a job now. Of course, we all need to make money. But when you look over the long arc of your career, be really, really, really mindful of where you want to go and if there's already representation there. A lot of companies have a lot of work to do. A lot of companies have made some major progress. But I think taking that long lens and really being mindful of what types of people get promoted here, who is in the C-suite, is an important viewpoint early in your career.
Love that perspective and that advice. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Lisa. Any last takeaways for our viewers before we wrap up? Anything that you would like that we haven't asked you so far that you would like that it would be a shame that you didn't say before we ended our time together?
I think for me, probably the most important thing on this topic of leading without formal authority is the main beneficiary is you. You are going to spend most of your waking hours at work. Those hours ought to be enjoyable. They ought to be a situation where you enjoy being around your colleagues. You can get the support you need. And a lot of that comes from how intentional you are about the way you approach it. So you can look across the long arc of your career, set a North Star of where you want to go, but also don't neglect where are you today and how are you experiencing your job today? Because you're not going to get another go around this life. So make the most of the moment that you have in front of you and really be very intentional about the way that you manage yourself. It'll all come back to you.
I absolutely agree with that. The advice that we close the course with is don't wait. Don't wait until you have the title, the corner office, the big salary. You can start leading no matter what role you're in today.
I really like what you said about the title catching up with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa and Elizabeth. I love that we were able to just really explore some very solid strategies to, I think, empower job seekers during these unique times. Garrick, some really great advice and information today, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I'm probably gonna have to go back and watch this again just to absorb it.
And thank you so much to everyone that tuned in and everyone who submitted questions to really make this a much richer discussion. For additional resources on job searching, please feel free to visit the URL that you see on the screen. I'm Ashley Kennedy, and this is Live with LinkedIn Learning. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.